Welcome to Face to Face. This is a show about change and what's next. It's a show that asks questions and peels back the layers of our average everyday experience and goes beyond scratching the surface. We interview people doing incredible things who are making a difference around the globe. Join me as we listen in and get one step closer to understanding that big ideas shared create collaboration. Collaboration can inspire community, and communities create social change. I'm David Peck, and this is Face to Face. Today's interview is a lot of fun. It's with a guy who has a passion, in his words, a passion for growing things. He talks about simple living and the moral and wise application of knowledge. He wants to talk about indigenous, underused, neglected seeds. I mean, what actually is that all about? And food sovereignty. He's an ecologist. He's an agronomist, I suppose. He has a Ph.D. in agriculture, working in Chiang Mai in Thailand. We talk about seed banks, not food banks, but seed banks and harvesting. And I mean, the metaphors abound. I think you're going to enjoy it. Abram Bicksler is his name. He's with an organization called ECHO, not too far from one of my favorite places in the world, Cambodia, northeastern Cambodia. Hoping we're going to be working together, Abram and I, in the near future. You're going to enjoy this. Don't forget to also get a copy of my book, Real Change is Incremental, because frankly, I think you're going to enjoy that too. We'll talk to you soon. Well, welcome to Face to Face. We have another special guest with us today. I guess we're close to 100 interviews now, and I always say we have special guests, but we really do have a special guest here today, Abram Bicksler. He's the director of the ECHO Asia Impact Center. Abram, thanks for joining us today.
Glad to be here, David.
So Abram is in Thailand right now. Are you in Chiang Mai right now, Abram?
That's right. Here in Chiang Mai, Thailand, right in the northern part of Thailand.
And you know, I'm an old enough fart to say I'm still always amazed at the technology.
It's pretty incredible that we're streaming live here across countless thousands of kilometers.
That's right. Cultures, languages, the human condition, Abram, we are streaming across. Yeah, it's pretty amazing. So thanks for joining us. So I'm hoping to talk a bit about not only about you and about the work that you do and about your passion for social change and for impact and all that, food security and so on. We're going to get into some specifics, but I want to talk about the region too. I mean, as most of my listeners will know, I've got a huge passion for Cambodia. My wife and I, Elizabeth, we've spent time there. I've been going there for many years now, involved in development projects of one kind or another. But I want to talk about that. But before we roll on some of the more sort of specific things, tell me a little bit about you and maybe your family and how the heck did you end up in Thailand? Why ECHO? Yeah. And tell me about what it is that gets you out of bed in the morning.
Yeah, that's a great question. You know what? If I had my way about it, I probably would have ended up as a landscape architect, probably in the Midwest. I'm from Illinois, so not too far from Toronto. And that was what I was gunning for, really, in undergraduate, doing landscape architecture. I've had a passion for growing things since an early age, and I went to a small school in Indiana called Taylor University, and it was there at Taylor, my first semester, I took a environmental science class and had never left the country, and for the first time in my life, I really came face to face with a lot of the current realities of the world and just how different a lot of realities for most people, frankly, were than my own reality, and just really resonated deep down within me. And being a person of faith, I also saw a real desire and a real drive to help people on a physical level as well as a spiritual level. Those things kind of came crashing together in kind of an epiphany early my freshman year at my undergraduate, and my whole life direction changed to basically agricultural development and being involved in that somewhere, somehow. Mm-hmm. It's hard as an 18-year-old, knowing what that all entails and what it means, but pursued graduate studies then thereafter, a master's degree and a PhD, both from the University of Illinois, where I was in the School of Natural Resources and Environmental Science, and graduated with both those degrees, really focused on sustainable agriculture, but also development best practices. And Midwestern sustainable ag is certainly different than tropical agriculture, but the ecological principles are really the same. They really are based on the same major principles, and one thing led to another, and met my wife there at graduate school, and we were married 4 years and moved to Chiang Mai, Thailand 6 years ago, where I started actually teaching at a study abroad school for American undergraduates in sustainable development. All the while I was volunteering with Echo Asia here in Chiang Mai. And 2 years ago I became the director of Echo Asia. So it was a really, it made a lot of sense, the transition. I had 4 years of mentorship of a really incredible ag development worker who started the office here in Chiang Mai, and then he moved back to the States, and I became the director 2 years ago.
So I read here, your blurb on your site, you fight world hunger, and then here I'm going to quote, ECHO exists to reduce hunger and improve the lives of small-scale farmers worldwide. We work to identify, validate, document, and disseminate best practices in sustainable agriculture and appropriate technology. So, I mean, the close quote. So the metaphors abound, right? The planting seeds, the breaking ground, the tilling of the fields, and it goes on. I mean, it's actually really quite brilliant. But before we go there, so your environmental science class, was that the seed for you? Was that, I mean, you look back in your past and, you start to connect the dots and you see where family experience and travel and these kind of things all play a role. But for you, was that professor, was there a book? Was there a moment where you said, wow, I want to help change the world?
Yeah, absolutely. I would say that there was a month in there, I think it was November. We were going through a textbook. I still remember it. It's Environmental Science by Nebel and Wright. And
sounds riveting, Abram.
Yeah. We also, our campus had Clive Calver, who was the president of World Relief back in, this would have been 1998. He was a speaker. He spoke for about a week on campus, and it was those things kind of coming together. I'd say that was the real seed. Hearing Clive and being riveted by the work that World Relief was doing at the time, and just the real tangible things that could be done through best practices, through simple living, I think was a big takeaway from that class as well. And then the moral application, or the wise application of knowledge, I think really came to the forefront for me during that time, and just seeing, I felt really responsible for the things I was learning, and then to apply those things wisely.
So, you use, it's such a great phrase, the moral and wise application of knowledge. But, having been, working in the field for a few years now, and seeing different approaches and seeing, Brecht talked about a fourth wall in theater, and I think a lot of times development workers build walls instead of break them down. And this whole idea of listening to communities that they work in, and listening to children, and listening to boys and to girls, and so on, doesn't always happen in the way that I would call, that I would like to think is sustainable and holistic and meaningful and inclusive. Do we have it all right here in the West? I mean, is that what you're doing? Are you coming into a community and going, "Hey, we know what the moral and wise application of knowledge really is all about"?
Yeah, I would say there is so much to be learned from local knowledge. And one of the reasons why this office got started back in 2009 was because ECHO, for almost 30 years, had been based out of Fort Myers, Florida. ECHO was started in the early 80s. Based out of Fort Myers, Florida, it's about the closest the U.S. gets to a subtropical climate.
Sure.
And it was there, and it was dependent upon learning new techniques, learning about new seeds, underutilized crops, techniques from people that were writing to ECHO back in the days, emailing them later, but then also coming and in person sharing about their experiences. But one of the reasons why ECHO opened an office here in Chiang Mai was to be that much closer to the people whom we work with, the development agents, ag missionaries, academics, farmers, to be on the ground and ears on the ground, eyes on the ground, to learn from communities, to engage in participatory methods, and then to take that local knowledge and to attempt to verify it, and that there's a whole spectrum of verification that can go on. But really to be here and to really offer kind of a two-way street of kind of an information hub, taking in information, taking in indigenous, neglected, underutilized seeds with potential, and then also sharing those, disseminating ideas and information, seeds, disseminating ideas that are working in communities in Cambodia and sharing those with communities in Myanmar or Northeast India. So, there's a tremendous amount to be learned if we just can learn to be quiet, to facilitate, to ask good questions.
Hey, so I'm close to 1 billion people, I think. You can help me out here, but I'm pretty sure I'm fairly close with my UN stat, World Bank stat. Close to 1 billion people will go to bed hungry tonight, I think, from what I understand. And I guess obviously that's, there are very, I go to bed hungry from time to time, but what does that actually mean? Well, not a whole lot, because I'll have a banana first thing in the morning, and I have this access that so many people around the world don't have. Can you make a distinction, Abram, between hunger and malnutrition for me?
That's a great question. Yeah, and the stats get kind of intertwined at times. You're absolutely right. About 3/4 of the world's chronically hungry people are here in Asia. Often that's overshadowed by Africa. But hunger is not having enough food to eat on a routine basis. If you're talking about chronic hunger, malnutrition is having potentially food to eat, but not the proper nutrition, the nutrition that will get you through the day, the nutrition that enables you to have a productive life, the nutrition that allows children to go to school, to be able to learn in school. And so often they're related and often they're linked, but increasingly, especially with the obesity and an overweight epidemic that we're seeing in the developed parts of the world, you can have plenty of food, but being malnourished as well.
So I've spent time on your site and certainly understand, I think, to some degree, the interconnectedness or almost the interdependency of the idiosyncrasies of living life day to day, right, on the ground. What happens when there's a flood? What happens when we don't have rain, etc. Tell me. Echo is, and you, by the sounds of it, based on your work academically, but also practically, and that's the thing I think I love about you, Abram, is that you are clearly an academic with a Ph.D. in a very specific field, right? I mean, the crack about the riveting textbook. I mean, it's a good thing the world has people like you, but you're also on the ground. I met a philanthropist recently who donated a significant amount of money to an initiative that we were involved in right out of the gate, within hours of meeting this guy. And in the same conversation asked me if I found out that I was an electrician by trade, construction worker, and said, hey, I'm heading to Haiti to install some solar panels with a group of people. Would you come with us? I've never met this guy before in my life. So not only is he the philanthropist, but he's also on the ground getting it done. And I think that's what I have a great deal of time and respect for folks like you who've got this theoretical knowledge, but who aren't interested in just, blowing the dust off library bookshelves. So how do things like gender disparity, how do things like education, feeling empowered, mental health, all these things, how do they impact the way a farmer works? You talk about inequality on your side and empowerment and so on. And a solution for a family is not just about getting the right seeds or the right fertilizer, it seems to me.
Absolutely. And there's so many factors that can impact livelihoods. We talk a lot about food security and livelihoods, and increasingly food sovereignty as well. Yeah, food sovereignty, and just having the right to decide what you grow, what you eat. I think this is integrated into seeds. It's a big part of what we do, and we see the connection between not only food security but food sovereignty and in seeds. And I think one thing that we as ECHO try to do to help in all these various realms is there's no silver bullet in agriculture. As you know, there's no silver bullet in development either. We like to offer people options. We like to have an open-handed approach and say, here are options. We've seen these options work in other parts of the world, maybe with a climate similar to yours, maybe with a culture similar to yours. Maybe we've vetted and verified these options both through the academic literature, but also maybe we've tried it up at our seed bank. We've done research on it, or we've seen other people that have grown these successfully in their small farm resource center. And kind of our bread and butter are ideas and techniques and seeds related to ag development, but we also offer information and ideas and trainings on water and sanitation, on participatory appraisal and participatory methods and approaches to development. We offer things on seed banking and seed saving, information on veterinary science, and a lot of it we're not experts in all these things by any means. I'm more of a generalist than anything. As an ecologist, I think it's probably set me up well to be a generalist. So we can put people in touch with others who are experts in those fields, or not necessarily holding an academic degree, but experts, farmers who have successfully implemented things like agroforestry. We can put people in touch with others who have been there, who have done it, and the hope would be that we can save people time, cut the learning curve by far. We can help save people resources, and
isn't
waste money.
and Abram, isn't there something to be said for good leadership, or someone who's and maybe there's a distinction here between bright and smart, but isn't there something to be said, a wisdom in bringing in the experts at some point and saying, we don't know what agroforestry is really all about because we're specializing in X, Y, and Z, so let's get this person in to tell us more, to teach us more, and so on. And I think certainly as a development guy, and my background academically is philosophy, and you can get pretty arrogant and pretty cocky and condescending in any of these fields, but I think that the approach as you learn more is to say, well, hang on a second here, holy cow, there's look at the connections here, look at the implications, and like you said earlier, be quiet, ask some good questions and see what bubbles to the surface.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. I think humility is essential for any good development work, and there's so much to be learned from local knowledge, and I really fear there's so much to be lost as well, as we see so many cultures displaced. And I think thinking of Southeast Asia with land grabbing in Cambodia and infrastructure development in China and Laos and Myanmar, and as local cultures are displaced, we're just in such danger of losing local knowledge, in danger of losing local seed varieties that are a huge part of culture as well. And just having the humility to learn from people, to ask people those questions. Yeah, it takes a big, you have to swallow your pride. For sure.
So tell me a little bit more about, let's get a little more specific here on this seed banking idea. I mean, I think in principle I know what this is all about, but and your concern about, we've got displaced cultures and land grabbing and what's actually happening here. So are you talking about a couple of different things here from a seed banking perspective, but also trying to use, what was the phrase you used? A phrase here, indigenous, underused, neglected seeds. What does that really mean? Is that, hey, there's a plant that's actually going to go extinct here, or is it about using a local, I don't know, seed that has more fruit ultimately attached to it rather than bringing in a foreign seed?
Mm-hmm. I'll attack the seed banking question first. One thing that we're really passionate about, and I just love seeds and our staff here.
Abram, do you have a T-shirt that says "I love seeds"? Yeah, or
actually, our EcoAsia T-shirts do have a picture of seeds on them.
That's pretty funny. Okay, there's a very small group of people in the world who love seeds, I think, just so you know.
But one integral component of EcoAsia is our seed bank. We have a seed bank in Mai, Thailand, about 3 hours north here of Chiang Mai, and at our seed bank we have about 2 acres of production plots. And really the goal of our seed bank is to find crops of merit that do well here in Asia, that have a real niche for smallholder farmers, either because they're easy to grow, because they improve the soil, because they're high in nutrition, and maybe there's a market aspect to them as well. And our seed bank, we evaluate crops, and most of the crops that we have at the seed bank are from Asia to begin with. They usually have a broad range, but we evaluate them. We try them at our seed bank. We see how they grow. Are they easy to grow? Do they have diseases, problems? And then we actually offer them to our members. We have a free membership. If anyone's interested, I probably talked about members a couple of times, but we have a member network of about 1,500 organizations and individuals who can sign up for free on www.ecocommunity.org. And that's really kind of how we network people. And part of being a member is having the ability to receive free sample packets of seeds from our seed bank to try in your context. Hopefully low risk to farmers, to see what grows, what works well, what fits in culturally, what fits in environmentally, what fits in culinarily. If you can have an incredibly nutritious plant, and if no one eats it because they don't know how to cook it, then what good is it?
Yeah.
And so really our desire of our seed bank is to help preserve biodiversity that in many cases farmers have created just through saving their seeds over generations and have created varieties that grow well in their areas and hopefully other areas. So to preserve that biodiversity, to share it with others, I think that biodiversity is best preserved when it's growing and is adapting and is evolving to particular locations. When seeds are being shared among communities and organizations. And, I think there's a huge potential as well to encourage others to start seed banks, whether they're at the community level or they're at an organizational level. We've talked about the organization that you're on the board with in Cambodia, and, there's just a huge potential for individuals to start seed banks, for organizations to start seed banks, whether they're a physical location or whether it's a person that is saving seed year to year and sharing that with farmers to use best practices and how to store that seed to keep it from being eaten by insects or deteriorate from the harsh tropical conditions. But that's one thing we're passionate about, is just sharing our seeds with others, sharing our knowledge that we've learned through the years with others, and how to, in a lot of cases, very inexpensively and with very low input, create a seed bank that people can use to help farmers store and save their seeds, and in doing so become less dependent on commercial sources of seed, which oftentimes involve high input costs and loss of local seeds.
So I don't know if this is an area that you've done much thinking or reading on. I would imagine it would be. I've just finished teaching a course at Humber in issues in international development, and we got a little sidetracked at one point. Maybe it was more me independently, but on the whole notion of GMOs. I've done a little bit of reading on it, and this whole idea of genetic modification. And it's certainly, the implications are far-reaching on a lot of levels. It seems to me it's not just happening at a farming level, but where do you land on that? I mean, we've got the agrarian revolution. We changed the type of wheat. We changed the world, right? And on one hand, you go, this is got to be the future to some. Check this out. I don't know how true this is, but I recently was sent a link and I did read it, and it looked like a legitimate news source. But food is now being made out of human excrement, and in Japan. And apparently this is, something that could actually work in the future. And wouldn't it, accommodate us on so many levels? And think about the environmental implications and so on because of the protein content that's in feces, I suppose. So pretty crazy to think about that on one level, but yet, wow, what a 25th century-like solution. How Blade Runner of you.
Right, absolutely. And that's the first thing that really came to my mind, is that some of the technology that's available is really from a scientific perspective really brilliant, and yet I find myself working for an organization that really is targeting smallholder farmers, the farmers that probably lack infrastructure to begin with. If they have roads, maybe lack market access to inputs. If they have access to inputs, maybe they lack access to capital to buy those inputs.
Right.
And
Right.
I think one thing that we focus on in our seed bank are open pollinated crops and varieties of plants, simply for the fact that farmers can save seeds from open pollinated plants, whereas they cannot save seeds from hybrid plants. The seeds that you buy from a breeder who would be hybridizing and selling seeds, as soon as you start to use hybrid seeds, then we've seen in a lot of cases where your local land varieties go extinct very, very quickly, and then you become beholden really to purchasing seed year after year. Same thing with GMOs. GMOs typically are with hybridized seed, and I think they have their place in industrialized agriculture when convenience and access to chemicals is something that maybe you're going for commodity cropping. But with the smallholders that we are working with through our network, we really land on the side of what are techniques that we can promote that are low input, things that farmers don't have to buy.
Seem a little more traditional almost by the sounds of it.
Absolutely. And, low input, farm derived inputs. And, it doesn't necessarily mean outdated. It means,
Right.
Can we have synergy in the ecological bases and functions that are already happening on someone's farm? And, can we, through good management and, maybe seed varieties that we're offering through our seed bank or other people are finding, increase productivity, reduce input costs, and in doing so, improve yield and maybe profit as well for farmers. And
so it sounds to me like you're okay with GMOs as long as it's your phrase, industrialized agriculture. Keep it inside of a greenhouse. Keep it away from my family farm, and we're okay.
we
Major, hey, Abram, I get it. Major form of reductionism there.
That's right. I think that they probably have their place. I would certainly tend personally to be more cautionary, probably more of a European than an American in terms of guilty until proven innocent when it comes to things like new technologies and whatnot. Maybe more of a Luddite, but
so you're an old fart too.
I've seen places where GMOs have for plant protection purposes have done a good job,
right.
with whom we're working with, and I think really for the future of agriculture, I think we're going to see kind of a return to more processes that are ecologically based. And I just think for sustainability purposes, if you have an oil-based agriculture like we do in the industrialized West, then GMOs are part of that. They're a cog in that system.
Right.
But there's a heavy reliance upon oil. There's a heavy reliance upon mechanization, and there's just in other parts of the world we just don't have that. And I don't know if we're always going to have that in the West either.
You've seen on the ground examples of where things like this have been imposed, and it's had a detrimental effect on local agriculture.
Yeah, especially when it comes to just the introduction of hybridized seed. And again, I think that hybrid seed's a phenomenal tool for agriculture. And there's a lot of reasons why we use hybrid seed: for improved yield, resistance to falling over, flooding, resistance to pests and diseases. But one thing that concerns me personally is just the loss of local genetic diversity. It's been estimated that we've lost about 75% of the genetic basis of our agriculture in the last 100 years. That's a loss that will never be replaced. And I have seen just a kind of a direct connection to farmers using new and improved hybrid seeds and the loss of their own farmer-derived varieties in a very short period of time. Sometimes 3 to 5 years, just because of the high humidity that we often have here in the humid subtropics.
hmm Hey, so you mentioned briefly there something earlier about the West, and I live in Oakville, Ontario. It's one of the more affluent communities in Canada, frankly. And there's divisions. There's a lot of people still at risk in this community. If you drive about 5, 6 kilometers south, you've got some of the wealthiest families in the world, and you would drive through the community and say, okay, there's nobody at risk here. There's nobody that needs anything, right? That's kind of how you would feel. It's a town of just under 200,000 people. And yet, I work with enough local organizations to know that there are lots of people at risk, that food security, in italics, is a bit of an issue here, that obesity is an issue, that nutrition is an issue. And so what we're starting to see are local organizations that are growing things more,
Hmm.
and that may not be quite as fascinated by seed as you are, but are very much into this idea of local farming. So on the way to taking my son to play soccer in the summer, we're going to drive by two local gardens where people are coming to do their own farming, if you will. Do you see this as a little bit of a fad, or is this a real shift, do you think, in the thinking and our understanding about, the little things making a big difference?
I'm not a prognosticator by any means. I certainly hope that it's more than a fad, and that it really is a kind of a long-term change. I've seen increasingly people being concerned about what they're eating, people trying to find linkages to, obesity and being overweight, but as well as some of these chronic gut issues that we're seeing in health, and people becoming more concerned about Crohn's disease and irritable bowel syndrome and some of these things. And yeah, I certainly hope that it is a shift towards more local eating. I hope it's a shift towards more healthy, wholesome eating. I think the amount of food processing that goes on scares a lot of people. I think for good measure. I think that the fact that we've reduced a lot of agriculture to just a purely commodity
Mm-hmm.
crop production system. If it's corn, rice, wheat, or soy, it accounts for a great percentage of what we eat. And I think just a return to um, realizing that food is diverse and our diets probably need to be diverse as well, and that we're at a real kind of potential crisis for putting all of our eggs in one basket. I don't see anything on the horizon anytime soon in terms of food and farm policy in the West really shifting us back towards more healthy eating. But something that's outside of our control that would probably have the same effect of doing that is either high oil prices or climate change or
Yes.
pest and disease outbreak cycles that the technology I think is only going to go so far, and
Mm.
that we will come to a point in time where I think our technology is not going to be able to keep up with a major pest or disease cycle. And it might really force us back to diversified cropping systems, local cropping systems, systems that are frankly probably more labor intensive, frankly more management intensive, which also means more thought provoking and
Well,
you know
what's interesting. What's interesting about what you're saying there is that even I think speaking to some local people working with some of these community gardens that are being funded by organizations throughout Ontario and certainly being supported by the government and so on some level, are that it is thought provoking because how it's about trying to get people away from say a food bank and start relying on something that is totally commodity driven on some level because this is what's left over, so we'll send it to the food bank. That's good
mhm,
enough for people who don't matter. Okay, sorry,
mm,
that's pretty cynical, but unfortunately I think that's kind of what we end up with. So get a little more involved with your community garden and all of a sudden you're eating things that actually have nutrients and you're a little more involved, and
uh-huh.
and and you're engaged. And unfortunately you've got a climate where you can do this 12 months of the year. We don't. We're limited by our winters. But I think what's exciting to me about it, Abram, is that I think it's like it's yes, it's practical. People are eating better food hopefully because of community gardens, but they're also planting. Sorry about this. They're planting seeds to
Hmm.
that hopefully are going to open them up to other worlds and their kids and so on. It's Earth Day today. My daughter says to me as she's walking out, 7 years old, Dad, make sure you turn off the lights before you go out today. And I was
Wow.
like, that's it's funny, but on another level, that's amazing. That I
Hmm.
wouldn't have said that to my mom and dad 40 years ago. There wasn't an Earth Day 40 years ago, right? It's so. I mean, I don't know about you, but I hear a hopeful. I don't know where you stand. I'm quite hopeful, and I hear a hopeful tone in your voice as well.
I absolutely. I think, yeah, I think there's a lot to be won back. Really,
Mm,
maybe something what we've lost. I'm the first generation to grow up off farm. My parents both grew up on small, diversified, 200-acre family farms in northern Illinois, and they grew up with dairy cattle and hogs and chickens and oats and alfalfa and corn and soybeans and hay, and they grew up with the fruit of their labor
mm,
and also the blood, sweat, and tears, but the self-sufficiency and the ability to put in a hard day's work, but see the fruit of their labor. And I'm hopeful, David. I really am that we will recoup some of what we've lost. And
mm.
I've seen how some of these systems can be so incredibly productive, whether it's Joel Salatin's farm in Virginia, or it's a small farm here in Thailand. Maybe a hectare or 2 hectares, but feeding not only the farmer's family but multiple families in the community. Or that organic farmer that I worked with in central Illinois, who was growing food on just a hectare or two and feeding numerous families through his CSA boxes. And yeah, I really do think that we're kind of in maybe at a turning point, really, for seeing just a return to these practices, and just to realize that there's more to life than just going to a job 8 to 5 and not knowing your neighbors, but getting involved and
Hmm.
turning your front yard into a vegetable patch, and getting to know your neighbors again, and feeding yourself a little bit, getting some exercise while you're doing that.
There's something profoundly relational, spiritual, and holistic, and just wonderful about sharing a meal together with people, and
Mm,
something we so often take for granted. Deeply, obviously connected to farmers and the ground, and hopefully anyway. And I think it's pretty marvelous. I mean, it's crazy. We could go back through our conversation today and probably find 25 different metaphors and phrases that we use that have this agro kind of connect.
mm,
Hey,
absolutely.
hey, so when you come home, when I say home, home sounds like Thailand for you guys now, but when you come back to the States, Illinois, is the first thing you reach for a box of craft dinner?
No, it's not. We do miss some of the food that we can get in the U.S. that we can't get here, but we're spoiled by Thai food, David. I have to admit,
Yeah, that's
spoiled
true. Yeah,
spoiled by all the fresh tropical fruits, and
yeah.
just the seasonality year round of the tropical fruits here. But we certainly do have our go-to things in the U.S. The Western food that we miss in moderation. We eat out at a restaurant maybe once, and we're like, all right, that's enough
Right.
of a restaurant chain for
Yes.
us. Let's make our own food, or let's try to find some jasmine rice in the grocery store, or make some sticky rice
Right.
for
Well,
our
how,
kids who've
yeah,
grown up in Thailand.
mango sticky rice, man. It doesn't get much better.
Oh,
So what's the worst thing that you eat from time to time? Is it Coke? Is it a caramel chocolate bar? I mean, what's
you know, without getting in trouble for any libel laws, what
yeah,
I'd have
that's
to
right.
say
Yeah.
would be, the first thing that we probably would go for, if we were craving just, it would probably be a greasy hamburger,
Yeah.
maybe from one of the chains. But yeah, that would probably be about the worst thing I'd eat, both because of its industrial ag implications, as well as just the calories and the lack of nutrition from it. But yeah, every once in a while, it surely does
Do you know
strike
just
a chord.
just before we end, I mean, maybe we could end on more a comment about globalization. Do you see that happening? I mean, I certainly do. I've been going to Cambodia now for about 13 years, and seeing a real shift. And there's no real big chains in Phnom Penh yet or throughout the country. However, at the airport, there's a Dairy Queen and there's a Burger King, and eventually they're going to reach out into the country. Do you see that really impacting the society? Do you see the West moving east? Certainly there's been an explosion of Thai and sushi
Mm.
restaurants around where, the Toronto area. So, is the East moving west a little bit?
I
But
think it's a lot of all of the above. I think the West certainly has been moving east for quite some time with all the chains and whatnot. Increasingly, I am seeing the East moving west, like you mentioned, but also the East moving east, especially with
mm,
China becoming a global player. And as the U.S. and Canada, I think the U.S. talked a lot in the last couple of years about Asia as the pivot, and just
right.
seeing really how China has kind of come in and I think really has become the pivot. You go to Cambodia, and certainly huge Chinese interest there. It's the same in Thailand, India as well, and so it's just really it's kind of a whirlpool, if I could use another bad metaphor, but a
Right.
whirlpool of just you have all these influences coming together and really vying and vetting for people's attention, and hopefully in the whole scheme of it, we're also seeing some positive change as well. And I think that's one thing where Echo comes back to. I often say, it's development is so holistic. It involves every facet of a human and being and community. And it's really we're not doing any good if we're just creating better consumers
Mm,
through the information. If we're just giving people the ability to gain more capital so they can buy more consumer goods, we've really missed the point. I think, and for all development, we really have to ask ourselves: are we just creating more consumers for the global market? Are we really empowering people to have safe places to participate in democracy, to improve their lives as they see fit? Are we helping people to gain access to better health and to better education and to the ability to choose the lives they want to live for themselves? Maybe that is gaining access to some of these consumer goods, but to livelihoods and these other things. And so, it's a really fascinating and exciting time to be in Asia, just as we see these things coming together. And yet, from within Asia, we do see people who worry about the migration of their children into the cities, who worry about the urban poor that
right.
are there, that are maybe less better off than they were back in their rural communities. So, seen change on all those fronts.
Well, Abram, I can't believe we've been online for over 40 minutes chatting, and I want to thank you today. We really, I often almost always end my interviews by saying there's just so much more going on than meets the eye,
Mm.
and we've barely scratched the surface here, but you've ended with almost a redefinition of globalization, it seems to me. And I think, if nothing else, there's so much here that we've chatted about, but, this idea of just being a little more attentive and listening, and again, the metaphors might be corny, but boy, they go deep. There's another one. So listen, thanks so much for joining us today. I really appreciate it.
My pleasure, David. This has been wonderful. I wish we had more time to talk, but
Yeah, well, we'll
look
do.
forward to the time when we can meet in person.
Absolutely, and we will do part two for sure down the road. Maybe we can do that in person up in Stung Treng, up in northern Cambodia, or maybe in Chiang Mai in the near future.
That'd be great. That'd be
Uh,
great. Live from Stung Treng.
There you go. Yes, I've actually done a couple interviews. I did one from An Long Vang. I've done one or two in Phnom Penh and one in Siem Reap. So yeah, let's spread out over Southeast Asia. Anyway, thank you again, Abram. That's Abram Bicksler today, joining us with from director of the Echo Asia Impact Center. That's echonet.org.